Be ready. 5 seconds.
Indian culture, by any estimate, is old. Like any ancient tree, it has many roots and many branches. The roots nurture a common trunk, and from the trunk emerge many branches. Some of these branches are about art, literature, science, medicine, religion, the art of governance, martial arts, and so on. There are also schools of thought, by which we mean groups of thinkers or spiritual seekers who share similar ideas about human life and the world. Many archaeologists and scholars have pointed out that some of India's cultural roots go all the way to the Indus. Later on, over time, hundreds of schools of thought emerged in India. We will see here a few early schools which have shaped India into a country with a unique personality. By understanding them and their roots, we can understand India better. There are four Vedas. They are the most ancient texts of India and indeed among the most ancient in the world. The Vedas consist of thousands of prayers in the form of poems and songs that were recited orally, not written. These texts have been committed to memory through rigorous training and passed on orally with hardly any alterations. The Vedic prayers were composed by sages in an early form of the Sanskrit language. They were addressed in poetical form to many gods or goddesses. Together with the sages, these gods or goddesses sustained truth and order in human life and in the cosmos. The early sages saw those gods and goddesses as one, not separate beings. In this worldview, some values were especially important, beginning with truth, which was often another name for God. The verses also call for unity among people. Early Vedic society was organized in different clans, that is, larger groups of people. Each clan was associated with a particular region of the northwest part of the subcontinent. Not much is known of how these clans governed their society. The Vedas only give us a few clues through words like a king or ruler, a collective gathering or assembly. Many professions are mentioned in the Vedic texts, such as weaver, potter, builder, carpenter, healer, dancer, barber, priest. Vedic culture also developed many rituals directed towards various gods or goddesses for individual or collective benefit and well being. Daily rituals were generally in the form of prayers and offerings to the gods or goddesses associated with fire, but those rituals became more and more complex in the course of time. A group of texts known as Upanishads built upon Vedic concepts and introduced new ones such as rebirth and karma. According to one school of thought, everything is one divine essence. The Upanishads also introduced the concept of self. the divine essence that resides in every being. It follows that everything in this world is connected and interdependent. Other schools of thought also emerged, which did not accept the authority of the Vedas and developed their own systems. One of them is Buddhism. A young prince named Siddharth asked to be driven through the city in a chariot, and for the first time in his life came across an old man, a sick man, and a dead body. He also saw an ascetic who appeared to be happy and at peace. Leaving behind his wife and son, traveling on foot as an ascetic, meeting other ascetics and scholars, he searched for the root cause of suffering in human life. After meditating for many days under a tree, he attained enlightenment. He realized that ignorance and attachment are the source of human suffering and conceived a method to remove these two causes. Siddharth then became known as the Buddha, which means the enlightened or awakened one. The Buddha started teaching what he had realized. He also insisted on a sincere inner discipline. Buddha founded a community of monks and later nuns who dedicated themselves to practicing and spreading his teachings. His influence was enormous. Jainism is another important school of thought that became widespread at the same time, although its roots are said to be much more ancient. If we observe ourselves carefully, we may notice negative thoughts and learn to turn them into positive ones. Sometimes negative thoughts are even directed at ourselves. In both Buddhism and Jainism, monks and sometimes nuns too began traveling across the land to spread their respective teachings far and wide. Some of them created new monasteries in faraway places, while others led ascetic lives in caves cut in the rock. Archaeological findings have revealed many traces of those monasteries, sometimes even the names of the monks who lived in the caves and slept on the stone beds. There were yet other schools of thought at the time. For example, one of them believed that this material world is the only thing that exists, and therefore there can be no life after death. This school does not seem to have gained much popularity. There was a wide diversity of intellectual or spiritual belief systems. People were free to choose what suited them. Although the Vedic, Buddhist, and Jain schools had important differences, they also shared some common concepts, such as the search for an end to suffering and ignorance, and many important values. The cultural roots we have seen so far are well documented in many texts. India has also had rich oral traditions, that is, teachings or practices transmitted through everyday practice without written texts. Among them are numerous folk traditions, that is, transmitted by common people, and tribal traditions transmitted by tribes. A tribe is a group of families or clans sharing a tradition of common descent, a culture, and a language. living as a community under a chief and holding no private property. Interestingly, ancient India did not have a word for tribe. Tribes were just different clans that lived in a specific environment, such as forests or mountains. There has been a constant interaction between folk and tribal traditions and the leading schools of thought. Concepts, legends, and rituals have been freely exchanged in both directions.